Welcome back. You're watching us here on Power Breakfast on CNBC-TV18. It is the fight for power in the US as well as we await US elections outcome. And as you can see at the top of our screens and the bottom of our screens as well, key updates coming in. Just ahead of that, we had the US markets which ended mildly higher. But just for the results, the early leads that we have are from states which have predictable voting patterns. The key would be what happens on the swing states itself. So we'll watch out for that. And if there is any sort of recalibration of those votes, then the final result would take some time. The most important question right now is what happens to everyone's portfolios, right? And how important the outcome of the US election would be for the equity markets worldwide and emerging markets as well. So let's get in Adrian Mowat, who joins us early this morning. Adrian, thank you so much for joining in. As we look at the road to the US power battles at White House right now, the important question, whether there is Trump or Kamala or, it's a very close battle which will play out over a fair amount of time as well as people are expecting it to. What could be the impact on equities world over and in particular in India, because there are so many moving parts around, right?
Yeah, I think, if there's a Trump victory, initially US equities will do well. You're already seeing the dollar move a bit higher today on the back of some of the initial exit polls and some people looking at the trends at local levels. So I think initially you get a rally in the dollar, strong equities, weak bond markets. Then I think we move into the sort of muddle phase. I don't think Trump is good for emerging markets. I don't think he's broadly good for, a stable geopolitical environment. So in that he brings uncertainty, I think for risk assets, that's generally not a good thing. With regards to my comment on the bond market, as bond yields rise, that does tend to put pressure on emerging markets, pushes down their currencies, increases their funding costs. So that's how I see it at the moment. Trump initially, you get a move in US equity markets, you get a move in the currency, but medium term, I think it's probably less good for the emerging markets.
Hi, Adrian. Good morning. This is Vinny joining in the conversation as well. Obviously, medium term, a bit of a concern. And what are you watching out for? Because we do have those supply chain disruptions that could happen or the tariff issues that could crop up as well if Trump comes into power. So how does that, how should we be viewing the Indian markets if that actually does happen and Trump comes in?
Yeah, so, well, Trump has had quite a good relationship with Prime Minister Modi. So India may be in a relatively better position. Clearly, if some of Trump's statements around tariffs against China are followed through on, again, that might help India in getting more manufacturing shifting towards India from China, which has been a trend that's been in place both under the Trump administration and under the Biden administration. You may be able to argue that that would accelerate, although let's not forget that if Trump goes ahead with tariffs on any import, that's also going to help impact imports from India. And whether he then thinks about, well, what about all these IT services jobs in India? Why are US companies employing so many people in India? Isn't that bad for the job market in the United States? So I think you should be a little bit nervous around the IT names if Trump wins.
Right. Adrian, just to ask you about China. Now, this is going to be a major factor depending on who wins this election. And we are possibly going to see continued tensions under Kamala Harris as well. But with Donald Trump promising to increase tariffs by at least 10% on products coming in from China, how do you think this trade war will escalate? Because no one will be able to escape the consequences of the trade war, and how will this impact markets worldwide in the months to come?
Trump's policy is particularly clear, but my understanding is the intention is to put tariffs on all imports into the United States. And then he's been making statements on the campaign trail about very, very high tariffs on Chinese goods specifically. So I think the Chinese would be concerned about the macroeconomic impact of a Trump victory, particularly a Trump victory if he also wins the House and the Senate, which probably means that they become even more focused on their domestic policy. We already have a very constructive policy from the People's Bank of China. The question is, how constructive will fiscal policy be? And I think on balance, if Trump gets in, then you get more of a fiscal stimulus in China as they try and protect their economy from these external shocks. So this could be ironically good for Chinese equities. If you look at the composition of the Chinese equity market, it tends to be very much domestic demand focused companies as opposed to exporters. And so if they get a help from the policy that needs to be put in place to accommodate for a weaker external sector, it might actually be good for their profits. If you combine that with very easy monetary policy, a lot of liquidity going into the financial system to offset some of these deflationary forces, that could be good for Chinese equities. And then you need to read through into the impact on positioning in emerging markets. Last month, we had record outflows from FIIs in India. Partly that was a readjustment towards China. That trend could continue, ironically, under the Trump win because the Chinese policy actually gets better for what's listed in the stock market.
Absolutely. And we are seeing polling close in some of the key battleground states, such as Wisconsin and Pennsylvania as well. Adrian, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, it's a very interesting day for the United States, for the world, and the markets as well. We'll keep coming back to you for more. So